Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, how are you today?
I'm okay. I'm presently drying out after going out for a monsoon-like event with Finley early in the morning. And the nature of being a dog owner is they give you the look, as on lines of, I don't care what it's like outside. We've got a contract. It was pretty wet this morning, but
yeah, that's sorry, I was a little bit surprised there, Kieran, because normally when my friends tell me they're drying out, I've gone away for a few days. I suddenly thought you might have a secret you hadn't been telling me. It's Monday, Kieran. Our listeners are listening on Monday. We are recording on Sunday morning, so we're going to rattle through this so you can get off and watch your goal fest at the Amex, or whatever it is you people call your stadium these days. It's questions day, Kieran, and as we promised last week to people at the live show in Salford, we had so many questions, we couldn't get through all of them, and most of them were very good, so we promised that we would pick out a selection and just get through those, Kieran, before we get into some of the questions from our waiting list. I know that means we have an apology to some of the people on the waiting list because they've got to wait another week, but they don't know that their question was going to be asked this week, Kieran. So why am I even apologising? That's enough apologies, Kieran. So this is the first question that we didn't get to answer last week at the Lowry. We'll do those first, and it comes from Dale Walmsley. And Dale Walmsley says, my team Grimsby have been pretty shit this season, like most seasons, he says, which is how you know he's a real football fan. Despite the fact they went up 2 seasons ago, but it's like, most seasons we're shit. We just won the Champions League, we're shit. But can you give me some optimism and say some nice things about Jason Stockwood?
Well, I can only presume that Jason Stockwood has been given a secret list of questions for the show because he sacked the manager last night.
I know.
so he's clearly tried. He said, "Oh Christ, Dave Walmsley's got a question on the show. Better show a bit of action here." So Grimsby have sacked the manager after I think 4 defeats. I've always taken the view that if you actually take a look at the data in detail, and I mean to be fair, Jason has put up a statement and said this is a data-based decision, that making managers the fall guys for poor performance is harsh. I mean, it's a bit like blaming me if my students fail exams. Ultimately, there's a limit to what you can do. But as far as the accounts are concerned, from a financial point of view, I think Jason Stockwood has done a fantastic job. He's given Grimsby Town a firm base as far as the balance sheet is concerned. I'm expecting things to turn around off the pitch, and that should lead to an improvement on the pitch as well, because it will allow the club to have a more competitive budget. It's a very strong League Two this season. Yeah, you've only got to look at the some of the attendances. So, Dave, I would say keep the faith. Jason's one of life's good guys. We've had him on the show. I've read his columns in The Guardian on a regular occasion, and he sees the bigger picture. So I think Grimsby as a football club are well run. Results, sometimes you can spend £1 billion on players and still end up losing at home to Brentford. As we saw with Chelsea. And I've got to say, hats off to Neil Maupay for possibly the best piece of shithousery of the season in getting a yellow card when not even being on the pitch for just popping on the pitch and nudging the ball away from a Chelsea player. Yes.
I mean, I would expect nothing less from an ex-Brighton player, Kieran, obviously, but even my heart went out to him a little bit. He can't buy a goal, and he had an open goal in front of him, and the keeper managed to nick the ball away so somebody else, he didn't even get the assist. That was the hardest thing about that. And I'm sure, we met Jason. It's hard to get an opinion of somebody's character in a short interview for a podcast, but from what I can gather about him, he's a very nice chap, and I'm sure he wouldn't have been happy about having to sack the manager. But it's interesting, Kieran, that we had the chair of Exeter City Supporters Trust on recently, who's nominally the chair of the club, therefore, talking about the fact that they tend to keep the managers. They tend not to blame the managers for the situation. They prefer the continuity. And I'm wondering if that's anything to do with being a fan-owned club.
I think the cost of sacking the manager, given that cost has to be borne by the Supporters Trust, is a contributory factor. And as somebody that comes from I'm not getting the violins out here. Comes from a working class background. I don't like anybody losing their jobs. People say sack the manager. It's bad. The performances are bad, but this is somebody's vocation. This is somebody's employment. No, nobody sets out to lose matches. And you could have 20 Pep Guardiolas or 20 Jurgen Klopps managing in League Two, and you still have two sides that get relegated to the Conference or the National League, regardless of how good the coach is. So I've always felt that managers get a pretty raw deal, but it's part of the psyche of football, because occasionally it does work and things do improve. But if you take a look at Chelsea, they've been through, they've spent £1 billion on players, and they've had Tuchel, Potter, Lampard, Pochettino. Well, changing the manager has not improved things, has it? That's my view.
Of course, you used to work for Uncle Terry, and with Uncle Terry, you didn't lose your job; you lost a finger. So you proper hard school. Our next question comes from Dell. There's a few of these questions are first names only because we didn't specify. We printed up some nice forms. Our lovely live producer Julian Chenery, Princess Julian, as we like to call him, because he's a proper man's man, proper old school man's man. Julian. He'll be full of himself now. He'll be strutting. He'll be listening to this, strutting around the room with his silk dressing gown.
Yes.
But also on this form, we ask people to give their names and the football club they support, and it's a worrying sign of the sort of people that come to our live shows that most of them grab the opportunity not to give their surname with both hands, Kieran. So this one comes from Dell, and I have to say, there's two clubs we get asked about very much on a regular basis recently. One of them is Everton. People are fascinated, stroke appalled by what's going on at Everton and their potential new buyers. But also Wrexham. And Dell's question is a fairly typical one, and it's basically, can Wrexham sustain their current spending and comply with FFP?
Right. And spookily, I have reason to believe that Dell is also a Grimsby Town fan.
Really?
Yeah. So we had the Grimsby Town massive at Salford Lowry last week. So
Dell and Dale.
Dell and Dale. Yeah.
Dell and Dale.
Sounds like a Radio 1 breakfast combo, doesn't it? Dell and Dale there, mate. So with regards to Wrexham, ultimately, if we take a look at the rules that apply to clubs in League Two, you're only allowed to spend 50% of your revenue on wages. There is significant belief that Wrexham have a very, very generous budget, but they're also being sponsored by Aviation Gin. They're also being sponsored by TikTok. These are global brands. The success of the Welcome to Wrexham series has resulted in a huge amount of income coming into the club. In addition, there's something called Football Fortune, which operates in League Two. And Football Fortune says that for every £100 that you put into the club through either cup runs or owner investment in the form of shares, you're allowed to spend £100 as well. So that works very well. So as far as I'm concerned, Wrexham are actually well within the budget, and they don't have an issue.
I like the fact, Kieran, when we do our live shows, that the questions tend to be more succinct,
Yes, they're very.
slightly less analytical than perhaps they would be if somebody's had the time to send an email. And Mel Bale has this very straightforward question: which Premier League club is the worst run financially?
Well, I spoke to the secret football finance lecturer, and he said,
That's you, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It depends. So I think I better give a lead.
Okay. Well, as long as we can outright. Finally, I've guessed one. I've got one right. I know who one of our secret people are. Okay, right. Is it going to be Chelsea?
It is going to be Chelsea.
Yeah.
If you look purely at the objective of a football club in terms of being profitable. So Chelsea have lost around about £1.5 billion. That puts them significantly ahead of Manchester City, who are second, and then third we have Everton. Now, if you take a look at it from the perspective of the fan base, those losses were mainly made under the Roman Abramovich era, which coincided with Chelsea's most successful period of time in the club's history with regards to winning trophies. Remember, when they won the Premier League under Abramovich and Mourinho, that was the first time in 50, 60 years that they'd done that. They followed that with two Champions League trophies, countless more domestic trophies as well. So if that is that's the price of doing business as far as Abramovich was concerned, in the sense that Chelsea was an executive toy. It was a plaything, just like his yachts and his other executive assets, and therefore he didn't see it as a burdensome cost, and there was no financial risk to the club unless his personal circumstances change, which clearly they have done since 2021.
This question, Kieran, comes from Yoni Kuzmia, who was a very nice young man we spoke to briefly last week. Very intelligent young man as well, I have to say. And this is a good question, I think. What needs to happen for the MLS to become a serious competitor to European football? Because we've spoken recently, Kieran, about how the Premier League has virtually seen off the rest of Europe. So is it possible that the only competition now will come from outside Europe and from the United States?
Yes, I met Yoni as well. And I would say in order for the MLS to be competitive with the Premier League and European football, it has to cease being a minority sport. In the same way that basketball, hockey, cricket even, and rugby are minority sports here in the UK. You are fighting for eyeballs. You are fighting for column inches as far as the print media are concerned. Whereas for the NFL, they get non-stop coverage. It's the same with the NBA. And I think that is nigh on impossible, because if you take a look at the value of the TV deals that have been signed, and I've just been looking at one of them in respect of, I think YouTube have just signed a deal, and it's costing them, I think, $1 billion a season, and they get sort of one slot of TV for the basketball, the NFL, whatever it is. The MLS TV deal, and this is the enhanced deal that they've signed with Apple, is worth $250 million a year. Now, that's probably about 1/12 of what the Premier League generate. So the only way that the MLS can be competitive is to be able to sign players which are going to attract more global interest. Lionel Messi is a novelty factor. There's no doubt about it. And has he enhanced interest into Miami? Yes, he has. But that in itself is not big enough. So I think you need a change of culture in the United States. I would also argue that you need greater jeopardy greater competitive balance, i.e., relegation. Because you and I both know, we've supported our clubs long enough to know that we've been in more relegation battles than we have promotion battles. And at the same time, those relegation battles they're not fun, but they are totally engaging in that every match matters. And you don't have that in the MLS. I appreciate they have the playoff system, which goes some way towards the top of the table, but it's not assisting in the bottom. So I think we're a long way in terms of the MLS before it becomes competitive. And if players are going there for money, there are also other leagues, such as the Saudi Pro League, where you can earn money. I mean, and I was looking last weekend, Jordan Henderson's team, they played in front of 624 people, for the Saudi Pro League. So even there, you've got high-profile players, high-profile managers, such as Gerrard and Henderson, and they're not shifting the dial. The only person that really is shifting the dial is Cristiano Ronaldo, who's sort of a soap opera on legs, as opposed to, he's a fantastic athlete as well. It works out that every person attending Jordan Henderson's match is paying £52,000 a season to watch him play. And that's before you take into account the wages of all the rest of the team and the running costs and the manager's costs and so on.
I think the two important words you used there, Kieran, were culture and time, because the MLS simply hasn't yet had the time to establish its own club traditions. I mean, we all have a team, football fans my age and football fans who are 12, 13, who the age you're most obsessed with football. Most of us will have a team in most European countries they're the results we look out for. For me in Germany, it's Union Berlin. In Italy, it's Fiorentina, and there are many reasons for this. But sometimes it's just because you, as a kid, you liked a club's kit, but all those European clubs we look out for all have long traditions the way English clubs do. They all have interesting badges, interesting nicknames, interesting club colours, and American football hasn't had time to establish that. So I think most people in England see it as a novelty. So, because one of the things I was going to say to you is that maybe in 10, 20 years' time, the MLS will look, people will get a bigger deal by selling it to England, but that's not going to happen either, is it? So the TV deal at the moment, it's only really youngsters in America or American football fans that are going to watch MLS football on telly, isn't it? It's not a product that the rest of us are particularly interested in paying a subscription for.
That's exactly right. We were all intrigued when Wayne Rooney went there and David Beckham, but I'd watched the clips on YouTube for the first 2 or 3 weeks and then forgot all about it. And it's the same with Messi. And my concern is Lionel Messi, without doubt, a titan of football in terms of his ability, what he brings to the game. But when he leaves Inter Miami, what's going to happen to their crowds? It'll be exactly the same as when Cristiano Ronaldo leaves the Saudi Pro League. There's going to be a significant drop unless they can replace him with Mo Salah or players of that caliber. But then you are very much relying on one player per team, whereas you go to watch Palace and it's you've got an emotional interest in every single player on the pitch, as opposed to being a fan of a player who happens to play for a particular club.
Yeah, very bloody emotional Friday night. None of them positive. Just a couple more questions to hoover up from the live gig, Kieran. The first one's from Eddie, and Eddie says, which clubs make up your current top 3 on the naughty step?
Right. When we talk about clubs, my focus...
Or people.
Yes, yeah. It would be the owners. Because clubs belong to the fans. So therefore, I would never criticise a club as such, because you're criticising the fans. I don't think the fans warrant that. But whilst we are talking about clubs, I'd just like to say, and I don't know if these words I've ever said before, well done, Gillingham, in the way that you dealt with that racist scumbag. In terms of what happened yesterday, banned him for life immediately. No messing around, no hanging about. But back to the naughty step. So the current top 3, and in no particular order, We've got Reading, and again, fair play to the Reading fans. We will continue to keep an eye and shout out for you. They had a fantastic demonstration pre-match yesterday.
Huge, yeah.
It was big, and it was all the right things: non-violent, direct action, fans coming together. They'd even had former players such as David Kitson. He was there as well. It was a magnificent effort, and they were rightly highlighting the challenge at the club. Secondly, Sheffield Wednesday. They are bottom of the Championship, which doesn't help things from a fan's point of view. They've also now been given an embargo by the EFL in the last 48 hours as a result of non-payment to HMRC. The owner there, Chansiri, he was the person that threw his toys out of the pram. He says, if you start criticising me, as you started criticising me, I'm not going to put any more money into the club. That's not a custodian. That's not a person who's got the best interests of Sheffield Wednesday at heart. And thirdly, sadly, as you know, I work in the city. It's got to be Everton, because the conduct of Mashiri, the unease that you have in relation to 777 partners does look like if the deal goes ahead, and it's a huge if, then we're talking frying pan into fire. Those are the clubs. Naughty Step is one way of looking at. Those are the three clubs of whom I have the greatest concern with regards to their immediate futures.
It almost beggars belief to hear you talking about concerns for Everton's immediate future, but I know this is something we'll be talking about probably on Thursday in a bit more detail. Two more questions, Kieran. First from Adam. We were 500 yards from Old Trafford at the Lowry Theatre, Salford last week. So there was a lot of talk at the interval and afterwards about this subject. And Adam says, is there any chance of a U-turn by Sheikh Jassim, or is it a done deal now for Jim Ratcliffe, whatever the deal is going to be?
Well, it's certainly not a done deal, because the Manchester United board did hold court the other week, and we've had no white smoke coming from the chimney with regards to a recommendation. So we'll have to wait and see there. I've been involved in deals and tried to sell enough companies who'd gone bust when I used to work for administrators to know that there is no such thing as a done deal until the contracts have been signed by both parties and the monies have been transferred across. So I think it's a very slim chance. Certainly the noises we heard from sources close to the Jassim bid was that they are completely hacked off with the conduct of the Glazers. They felt that they were slippery, I think is the way I would politely describe them. And they've certainly got no desire to return to the table. I think there's probably a greater chance of them taking over Spurs than taking over Manchester United at present. If we take a look at the Premier League, Manchester United are a club that are looking clearly for a change, or a change of influence, even if not a change of overall ownership. Spurs are in play, I think it's fair to say, given the circumstances surrounding one of their owners, and there are two, at least, other clubs of which I'm aware are also potentially could have a change of ownership. So if Sheikh Jassim wants to get into football, and people will say, well, hold on, isn't he a lifelong Manchester United fan? Well, Sir Jim Ratcliffe was supposed to be a lifelong Manchester United fan who had a season ticket at Stamford Bridge and tried to buy the club a year and a half ago. So that doesn't stop people from switching allegiances. So I think it's a slight chance, but it's not a 0-1.
Our final question, Kieran, from Salford, before we move on to a couple of other questions. It comes from Dan and Paul, and you'd be amazed how many of this sort of question we get, and it really cheers me up, Kieran, that for every complicated question we get about amortisation, we get a question like this one from Dan and Paul Who would win in a fight between Spider-Man and Batman?
Without doubt, Spiderman.
You think?
Oh, the power of the web. The power of the web. Yeah, you could. I just don't see how Batman could escape from that. And also his ability to leap from building to building. Whilst you might say, well, physically he looks like a Barry McGuigan versus Frank Bruno. I still think he's got the ability and the agility to take on Batman and do him some damage.
But Kieran, there's a very simple. If Batman's listening to this, feel free to take my advice. Very simple way to beat Spider-Man, Kieran. You just get a giant glass, put that over the top of him, and then a big beer mat underneath the glass, and throw him in the nearest bin. Job done. John Archibald has our first question from the pile, as Guy puts it. John Archibald says, I've been wondering about fines imposed on players and managers by bodies other than the club. Are these paid by the club? Does it depend upon the reason for the fine and or the employment contract? So I presume we're looking at FA fines, Premier League fines here rather than players being fined by the club itself.
Yes. So I did take this one to our secret sports lawyer, and it will come as no surprise whatsoever.
It's in the question.
It's even in the question. I think that the answer is, of course, it depends. It depends upon the nature of the charges. So if it was for personal conduct, then the chances are the player would have to pay the fine, or the manager. And we have seen managers fined for comments that they've made about referees, comments that they've made on a more general basis. If, however, the club felt that those comments were justified, then there is the opportunity for the club to effectively give some form of recompense and to say it's a bit like a professional foul. You've taken one for the team. You've represented the fact that the club feels that it has been poorly, shabbily treated, and therefore we're the people that stuck you in front of that microphone. You've represented the club. We feel that you've represented the club appropriately, and we don't see why you should, as an individual, suffer financially as a result of that.
Next question, Kieran, comes from Martin Toll. And by sheer coincidence, you have mentioned this club already, but we mention this club every week, to be perfectly honest. Martin wants to know, have Reading been treated fairly when it comes to FFP? And is the disparity between the Premier League and the Championship that drives clubs to gamble with their finances tolerable? I think I know the answer to that second part of the question, Kieran, because we discuss it a lot. But the first part of the question is an interesting one, isn't it? I presume Martin's a Reading fan. But have they been treated fairly? Because they've certainly been punished heavily, haven't they?
But they have. They've had a series of points deductions. But a significant number of those points deductions have been down to the behaviour of the owner, Dai Yonga, with regards to the non-payment of wages, the late payment of taxes, and so on. And in terms of fairness, I think you've got to look at how do you contextualise fairness, in the sense that we're supposed to try to have a form of level playing field for all 24 clubs in the Championship or League One. And with regards to that, Dai Yonga's behaviour as owner has been, in my opinion, poor or misguided or misled. Reading spent, for people not familiar, when he acquired the club, which was about 7 years ago, Reading had been in the Premier League as recently as 2014, and people forget that.
Yeah.
He spent in his first season twice as much on players as Reading had done whilst they were in the Premier League. He increased the wage bill significantly, even though he acquired the club just as it ended its entitlement to parachute payments. So he has tried, or rather he has approved a budget which in theory should have made the club very competitive. And on the back of that, ultimately he's failed. That's put the club into a very challenging FFP situation. And that's a contributory factor as to where it is today. with regards to his personal circumstances, I think it's fairly clear that the Chinese Communist Party is making it difficult for its citizens to get money out of the country as easily as it used to when it was very much keener on supporting investment in football. So I think, have they been fairly treated? Yes, they have been fairly treated in as much as, had it been any other club other than Reading under those circumstances, I would have expected the same level of sanctions. With regards to Martin's other point, does the current setup encourage clubs to gamble? Well, based on my figures, the average weekly loss of a club in the Championship, the average operating weekly loss, is £476,000 a week. Yeah, that's the price of your lottery ticket as far as being a club in the Championship are concerned. And that is a result of the cliff edge between the Premier League and the Championship. And also, at the wrong end of the Championship, there's a huge cliff edge between the Championship and League One. So if we're going to try to find a solution to this, to make clubs more sustainable, then my view is that you need a 92 club solution. In fact, you probably need you need to take into consideration the National League as well, because I'm a firm believer in 3 up, 3 down from League Two to the National League. We have seen Luton, Brentford, Huddersfield, Wigan, and Palace. Fair play to you when you got promoted in 2013. You've all managed to get to the Premier League without the owners of the club taking the same degree of gamble that we have seen with De Jonge at Reading. So I don't think the club has been unfairly treated, because there are examples of other clubs, the ones I've mentioned, who have come up without parachute payments, who have had a sustainable structure, have had a strategy for getting promoted. In my view, at Reading, you've got somebody who knows nothing about football having his trousers taken down by advisors, stroke agents, stroke influencers who just see him as an easy meal ticket. And I think I said at the Salford show, for clubs where things have gone wrong, I normally classify the owners as either idiots or scumbags. And I think Jonge is in the idiot class, in the sense that he was giving money, he didn't really know what he was doing.
Mm. Did you just patronise Palace then, Kieran?
No, I just praised them.
Yeah. Well, the difference being that when Steve Parish, Steve Browett and the others who took over the club at that time, in 2010, they were very clear in their communication to Palace fans that they had spent most of their money taking over the club, which is why that promotion in 2013 came as a total surprise to everybody, basically. And we all expected to go down, and we probably would have accepted it as well, because we were still so glad to have a club, and we fully understood that we'd been taken over by people who'd had to find the money, who weren't naturally rich in the first place. Whereas the problem with De Jonge is he's badly advised. Okay, I mean, somebody at the club must be listening when the EFL give them plenty of notice. And we've looked into this. The EFL say to them, look, you're clearly about to breach these regulations, or you have, and this is the punishment that comes along with that. And yet they seem to have totally ignored it. And also, I'm interested in what you said about China, Kieran, because it does seem in recent years that whereas before they were looking to make China a powerhouse of football, weren't they? But in recent years, it seems they do have a downer against their citizens owning football clubs overseas, don't they? And you could kind of argue that's been an unfortunate factor in De Jonge's downfall. Is not quite the right word, but economic issues.
Yes. With regards to the Chinese Communist Party position, I think it was a significant U-turn. President Xi, I remember seeing a picture of him with Sergio Aguero and David Cameron, I think, at the Etihad. So there was a degree of enthusiasm. Then the level of money being spent was probably at odds with certain elements of the Chinese Communist Party manifesto. So that resulted in a change. With regards to Dai Yonga ignoring the noises coming from the EFL, trying to work out. I think it's a classic case of stick your fingers in your ears and go ting-a-ling-a-loo, and just pretend that there's not a problem. And he's not the only person that's done it. I know plenty of people who have done that on both a corporate level in terms of the finances. If they didn't, I wouldn't have had an insolvency career, and I appreciate mine was many years ago. I also know people. I've got mates that do that on an individual basis, and you go, why have you just gone and bought that new pair of trainers? I really like them, but you've just done that, and you're mad. And they go, I was feeling. They were just so good. I go, yeah, but I know your circumstances. So, doing the right. It's easy. It's easy for me to say I know what to do the right thing, and then I do it because I'm naturally very, very cautious. But club owners, will say, look how successful I have been because I've been a gambler, and at the same time, you're the person that's never going to retire because you can't afford to.
I think it's significant, Kieran, that up here in South London, which is where your roots are, we stick our fingers in our ears and go la 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 la. Whereas down there in Sussex, you stick your fingers in your ears and go ting-a-ling-a-loo. You've changed, Maguire. You've
sold out.
Our penultimate question comes from Jonathan Turpin. Jonathan Turpin says, I'm an Everton fan, and when we were looking at Bielsa as a possible for our vacant manager's job last season, it was reported that he and his backroom staff would cost up to £1 million a week. Where does this sit in line with other clubs across the Premier League and the EFL? We hear about player wages all the time, but don't often think about costs for managers and their staff. It's an interesting one for Palace fans as well, because we were linked with a high-profile Portuguese manager during the summer, and all the rumours were that we simply couldn't afford to bring him and the 3 or 4 coaches that he insisted on bringing on their wages. So I think it's not just at Everton that this is an issue, is it?
Yes. I would be a little bit sceptical with regards to £1 million a week. I mean, that's £52 million in a year. And if we take a look at Leeds, when they initially came to the Premier League, Leeds' total wage bill was around about 120 million, with Bielsa as a manager. So could Everton afford to pay a wee bit more? Yes, they could. Bielsa is a coaching genius. There's no doubt about that. He's held in very high regard amongst his peers. That would put him on significantly more than any other manager, including his team, in football history. So I don't think that would be the case. They wouldn't potentially have to give compensation, or a lot of compensation. We've seen now clubs paying £20 million in compensation or more to transfer managers when they're in contract. But I don't think that would have been an issue with Bielsa, because he tends to just sign a 1 year contract at a time. But as far as the highest paid managers are concerned, we're probably talking somewhere in the region of £15 to £16 million a year, including bonuses. And of course, because they are managers, we quote their income on an annual basis, as opposed to the blue-collar players, where we always talk about it as a weekly figure.
So in the annual accounts then, Kieran, the manager's wages wouldn't be specified. All you would get is a wage figure of £100 million for the club, and then you have to work out, or try and work out, who's getting what for that. So it doesn't say manager is paid £5 million, player X £6 million, assistant physiotherapist £50,000. It's just a general figure that's given on the accounts.
It is. Under UK company law, it used to be the case that for every individual employee who earned more than £30,000 a year, you had to list not the names of the people, but the numbers. So you can imagine the fun I used to have 30 or 40 years ago going through football club accounts, trying to link the player or the executive to the wage packet. But unfortunately, well, unfortunately for me, I don't think the rest of the country will be weeping about this. The government changed the legislation for that, which I think is a shame. So the only thing that you have to show is the total remuneration paid to the board of directors, and you also show the highest paid directors' total emoluments. So this allows me to I put out an annual table of the most beneficial, or the most well paid executives in football.
Could you define emoluments, Kieran? Because I assume that's wages plus bonuses, is it?
It's wages, bonuses, benefits in kind, pension contributions. Yeah, it's the full works.
Our final question, Kieran, comes from Neil Kimpton. And initially, I had this filed under Neil's been in the pub with his mates and probably should have left at 10 o'clock. But the more I look at it, Kieran, the more I think in a rather bizarre James Bond gadget type way, he might be onto something here. Neil says, with football kits being so expensive, what's to stop clubs selling reversible kits? Home on one side, away on the other. Overall, it would save many fans money, even if the club charged a little more per shirt. It would also have a positive environmental impact. I mean, I've played in Sunday football games, Kieran, where the only compromise that could possibly be made was that one team turned the shirt inside out, so it looked a little less like the other team's shirt. But I can't imagine players at the highest level being happy with this, Kieran. But I'm starting to think I might. This is why I'm no good with money, Kieran, because I'm starting to think I might invest money I haven't got in this idea. I might phone Ali up. She's away at the moment to say, what's the chances of another mortgage? Because Neil Kimpton's had a brilliant idea, and I think we need to splaff all our money on it.
Well, I think it's an intriguing idea, and I do vaguely recall a few years ago, I think England had a reversible kit.
Did they?
I think they did,
Oh.
yes. One of the old Umbro kits, and I think that was pretty cool. Why do clubs don't consider this? It's because the aim of the club when it comes to merchandise sales is to part fans from as much of their money as possible. So if you had one kit and it cost, and the sale price was 10% more than the traditional one, you're still taking away the margins from selling two kits at full price, even if they are hardly ever going to be worn. So this season I've got Brighton's home and away. I've got our special European kit, which is white or sort of just off-white. And then people have pointed out that if you take a look at the opposition we've got, we're never going to wear it. But so you go, unless of course we get to the knockout phase, that's.
I'm pleased to hear that, Kieran, because there's a certain fictional football team that we know all about that tried the same idea. So I'm pleased to hear it happening in real life.
It certainly has its uses, because if you think about it, if you're going on a trip, you only need to pack half the number of shirts because you can wear it. It's a bit like underpants. You can wear underpants for 4 days consecutive, can't you? Because you've got inside in forwards, inside in backwards, outside in forwards, and outside in backwards. And and I'm a great believer in compact packing, especially living with the Baroness, who tends to be at the other end of the scale. Whenever we go on a break, she can't understand how I can go up to Liverpool for 4 days each week with just a rucksack, which contains all my IT equipment and my clothes as well,
and one pair of pants.
Yes.
I have a reversible jacket, Kieran. I've had it for a long time. I love it. It's red, but you can turn it inside out, and then it's a rather, I think, natty mustard yellow. I got it from in fact, I got it in Liverpool a long time ago from an alternative clothes market. And I only really wear it for run witness. If I want to know where Ali is, I put this coat on because she hates it. She cannot stand. She really hates it. So if I'm thinking to myself, I wonder where Ali is, I put the jacket on, and then miraculously she appears.
A bit like Mr. Ben.
Not going out. You're not going out wearing that. And I go, she tolerates the red side, but if I do it just to annoy her. I just every now and again I'll turn it inside out and say, I'm off now. She's not wearing that. You're not. Thank you to. This is why we have so few women listeners, Kieran. You know,
this is why we don't have a
it was
BAFTA
all right.
award.
Yeah, it was going. It was quite a good episode. And then suddenly, one of them started talking about annoying his wife, and the other one started revealing he only wears one pair of pants every month. It's where I went off David Beckham. David Beckham apparently is one of the nicest people you could meet, but I saw an interview where he said that he only wears his pants once, then throws them away, and that he never wears his socks more than once, and he throws them away as well. I went off him a little bit then, because I'd quite like to do that, but can't keep going to TK Maxx every day buying pants. It looks suspicious, doesn't it? Thank you to everyone who has donated to the pod via our Patreon page, including Andreas Nab, Barry Nichol, Des Doherty, Ian, Charles Jackson, Martin Avery, and Christopher Elkins. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, that would be very kind of you. And you can get access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. And if you want to do that, go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. We have a live show coming up very soon on the island of Jersey at the Royal Yacht. And if you want to get the last 4 tickets, I think, you can go to priceoffootball.com as well, or to the venue itself. And if you'd like to, again, priceoffootball.com. I'm saying it again. So if you want to buy our latest book, Unfit and Improper Persons, or one of our other books, or get yourself a Price of Football t-shirt, you can also find details on that website, priceoffootball.com. I'm just going to have to find a way of not saying that as often, Kieran. We'll be back on Thursday with our usual news pod. Until that time, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you to everybody who's supporting us on Patreon and all the other methods as well. We're also coming to Dulwich Hamlet FC on the 15th of November. And Kevin and I are also a great believer in public service and public libraries. And we're coming to a library in December with a bit of luck as well, just to chat about the book and so on. So we'll just hold this space. Those of you on the South Coast, those of you who were perhaps alive in 1066 or a town connected with it, you might be in for an unexpected surprise. What are these two doing here?
I think you've given enough clues as to where we're going now, Kieran, haven't you? It's Hastings, everybody.
Yes. And if that works, we might do a few more as well, because we're great believers.
We do plan to do some. We've been asked, we're both huge believers in libraries, and very dismayed by the cuts to the finances that libraries are getting. So we're doing one in Hastings on December the 15th, I think, Kieran, just a book event. Yeah. The one in Dulwich, the show in Dulwich is a book event, so it's not the live version of the pod.
But we'll probably do a Q&A, I suspect.
Oh, we will do. Yeah, no, we will do bits of pod. Yeah, but that's it's more of a book chat. There'll definitely be a Q&A. About yes, and then hopefully in the new year, along with more live shows, and we're just about to confirm a date in Scotland, hopefully. We will be doing some library events near you.
There's another way that you can support the show. You can give us a review. If you've read the book, we'd like to read your reviews on Amazon or any other bookseller. But if you're downloading the podcast, give us a review. It helps us to persuade guests to come on the show. It helps us with algorithms and so on. It doesn't matter what you could say. You could even say you would rather have the show presented by Michael McIntyre and God, because he appears to have given up his day job in terms of looking after us as a species and a planet. So therefore, perhaps he'd like to talk about amortization instead.
Yeah, one of those we can't afford, Kieran. I'll leave you to guess which one it is that we can't afford. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.